Good morning everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 8th of August and you're joined by myself, Philip Northard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. So we've rounded up to episode 370 this week.
Yeah, it seems that it's getting closer and closer to that 500th episode, isn't it? I think it just seems a long way off, but we are getting closer.
Yeah, we'll be closing in on that pretty quickly, especially with the midweek interviews that we're doing. Speaking of which, God, that was a good one this week. Dale Wyatt, who's the head of automobile at Suzuki GB. So we recorded that at the beginning of the week, and that was a really good insight into what happened at the brand during the lockdown, how the restart is going, and really his thoughts on where the brand and the market are heading.
Yeah, and it came quite timely because actually one of the stories we're going to be talking about is the results for July performance of new car registrations, and we did sort of hint at that in the interview with him and sort of try to get his view, and he did give an opinion of where he thought they were going to finish and why they were going to finish there, didn't he, in the interview as well?
Yes, he did. I mean, it's a very open interview, and it's actually at the end of the headlines this morning. So, do stay tuned to listen to it. But he's talking about Suzuki's place in the UK market, and last year they had a 1.5% share, and the ambition for a while is to take a 2% share, but he said they will only take a 2% share when they deserve it.
Yes.
And he actually said they don't deserve it at the moment, but that is the ambition. So that's a really sort of open and honest statement to make.
And I mean, we're talking about midweek interviews. I mean, we've had some fantastic figures in terms of downloads, haven't we, recently? And overall downloads, we've had some fantastic figures.
We have, and pretty soon we'll be able to do a top 10 on this. But I know you've been trawling through the figures, and they're looking really positive, aren't they?
They are. I mean, the Robert Forrester's special interview, and this was kind of right at the start of COVID, wasn't it? I mean, it's we critiqued it fairly early on, didn't we? In terms of that, everybody was actually, there was a lot of people sat at home on furlough in those early days, but Robert Forrester does really get behind the podcast and shares it across his business and really promotes it. But actually, the one that very closely behind Robert is Rob Lindley, and you can see why on that one. I mean, talk about the timing of that interview and then subsequent the withdrawal from Europe from Mitsubishi. You can see why that one has attracted so much attention, should we say.
Because it was only a week and a half or so before the announcement from Japan. And when we did the interview, Rob, of course, knew nothing about it. So we did actually have an update last week, didn't we, with a statement from Rob. But that's still a kind of timeless episode. So, do go back there and have a listen if you haven't done so already.
Yeah, and interestingly, I mean, it's not one of our stories this week, but the headline has hit in the Financial Times, connecting back to this the Mitsubishi. But the headline is that Mitsubishi Motors chairman resigns after 15 years. So a lot happening at the helm of Mitsubishi there, it looks like, and you can see lots of changes coming.
Yeah, and it's part of, I mean, my take on this is it's part of the clean out of the Carlos Ghosn regime. And I think he's one of the few senior execs who was left there. But following on from that, there's an absolutely brilliant piece in AM Online this week, written by Professor David Bailey, who's Professor of Automotive at Aston Business School. And he takes this big picture view of Mitsubishi, talking about what it means globally, and then drilling down into what it means for Europe and the UK. And as I say, it's a guest opinion, and is so authoritative. I urge anyone with an interest in the subject to head over to AM to have a look at that one. We're not covering it today because we've got loads of headlines, but it's well worth pouring yourself a cup of coffee, because it's quite a long read, but it's definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, we must say the Dale Wyatt will be at the end of this headlines as well, so make sure you do stay tuned to listen to the Dale Wyatt interview that we will be playing at the end of this headlines as well this week.
Yeah, so should we get on with the headlines?
Yeah, we've got a few. So the first one is that with the eagerly awaited July numbers, and we sort of mentioned this in, again, talking to Dale, the most recent interview, and sort of saying around there was a view that June was the sort of the temperament of the restriction lift, but actually, because of obviously Wales and Scotland not opening as did England on the 1st of June, and obviously there's still some of the constraints around a lot of the manufacturers remained on furlough until the sort of 4th of July. Really, it was going to be July that was going to be the true tester for activity in the market, and we eagerly waited the July results, and they say AM Online, the headline is pent-up demand drives 11.3% rise in July new car sales, and that's really been driven by private, and I mean, what a performance from the private registrations in the month.
Yeah, you're right, because private registrations were up 20.4% for the month, and fleet was up 5.2%. So it's good to see the recovery. Well, good to see some recovery in fleet. Still got a long way to go, but retail being up 20%, that to me indicates that we're seeing a lot of genuine pent-up demand being fulfilled here, because we know that there wasn't a huge amount of activity in the last week of the month, which is when we tend to see the pre-regs. So this is actually a very positive sign, with the market being up 11%, driven by retail demand.
Yeah, no, you're right, and you referenced pre-reg there, and as you say, I think there was sentiment out there that the last day's registrations that is obviously indicated to be pre-reg tactical registrations was down compared to like this the same day last year. So as you say, a true indication that some of either the appetite from the retailers isn't there to do pre-reg, or that the money isn't there from the manufacturers to support the pre-reg deals, or the fact that the product isn't necessarily there in the volume to be able to support large pre-reg activity. So it could be any one of those things, or a mix of those things, but again, sort of testament that 11.3% increase year on year is pent-up demand, and sort of testament that the demand is there from the consumers.
Yeah, and without wishing to take away from this good news, it's probably just worth reminding ourselves that the year-to-date figure is down 42%, and the SMMT is expecting the market to close at 30% down at the end of 2020. But going back to July itself, plenty of winners for the month. I mean, I've had a look at some of the best performing brands. So Renault, they were up 202% for the month. SsangYong were up 109%. MG up 77.5%. Dacia was up 77%. Land Rover up 38%, and Fiat up 32%. So some big increases here from a cross section of brands.
And some underperformance, should we say, in certain areas. And I think that, again, referring to the Dale Wyatt, that Suzuki actually did finish 46% behind on last year's. And he did explain why, didn't he, in the interview, that was the case? Yes.
He didn't know the month-end figures when we interviewed him, because there was still a few days to run, but he did point out that this time last year they were on run out of the Solero and Baleno models. So this time last year they had a good July, so they were down 46% year on year. But he actually said in the interview that they were tracking over what their target was for the month. So he was actually quite pleased. So it's interesting because whenever we see the SMMT figures and whenever there's a plus or a minus, there's always a story behind it. So
yes.
it's good that we actually got to the bottom of that one.
And I think, taking this out sort of into the European market a little bit, we talked each month, obviously, those European 5 with France, Italy, Spain, Germany and the UK. And actually the UK was the best performance in year-on-year percentage figures. So, as you say, we're 11.3% up for the UK. Germany was actually down 5.4%, so they were down to 314,000 registrations. Spain up 1.1%. Italy down 11%, so Italy still suffering. They were down 49% in May, 23% in June, and 11% in July. France seems to have been recovering. They were down 50% in May, but recovered at a 1.2% increase in June, and again a 3.9% increase in July. So, UK performing well. They have suffered in both May and June compared to some of those European markets, but July we are ahead of the game compared to some of those.
And a couple more observations about July. We saw the debut of Polestar, which is Volvo's electric performance brand. They made a debut in July and they sold 8 units. So well done, Polestar. But the one that's really puzzling me, and we were talking about this before the show, is Tesla. So Tesla isn't part of the SMMT. It's not one of the manufacturers that sign up to the SMMT. But the SMMT have listed the Tesla Model 3 as the 9th bestseller of the month, with 2,500 units sold. But we don't know how that's actually being accounted for within the SMMT figures, because there is a category, and anyone who knows the stats will be aware of this. There is a category for British imports and other imports. Now, under other imports, there are only 387 cars, so that's a long way adrift of the Tesla Model 3's 2,500. So that's a question for the SMMT. But interestingly, the Model 3 sold as many units as Dacia for the month, and it outperformed Fiat, Lexus and Porsche. So what do you make of that?
We'll leave that for the obviously compared to the other brands, what a performance. But it'd be interesting to get a view from the SMMT. Maybe it's something we can find out before the next podcast, see what the story is behind that and how they do report the Tesla numbers in their overall figures. But one that we could do with looking into. And then we're over to vans now. Make sure that we get the vans, because sometimes they don't get much headlines, do the vans, in terms of the performance. But this time they have, and it's actually Car Dealer magazine that have reported on the LCV market in their performance in July, and saying that sales of new vans grow for the first time since January, as July sees 7.1% increase for vans.
Yeah, and this follows 4 months of double-digit decline. So this really is welcome news. So year to date, the figure is down 38.6%, and the SMMT estimates that around 270,000 LCVs will be registered by the end of the year. So that will be a drop of 26.3%. But July was a good month for vans, medium-sized vans, so those weighing in at between 2 and 2.5 tons were in particularly high demand. They were up 12%, and bigger vans also increased. And this is good news for the sector, and the SMMT put it down to pent-up demand, obviously, and the return of the construction sector, where, of course, a lot of vans are sold into.
Yeah, definitely. And again, it's great for the UK, in terms of production and that demand into it. So I suspect we'll see that now for some time in that LCV market, as you say, with those sort of operations now returning to business and little businesses starting up again, isn't there, in terms of those home delivery demand and everything else. I don't know about you, but constantly there's neighbours, there's vans turning up all over the place from these the home delivery guys.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you can't go very far outside your house now without seeing a delivery van. So, yeah, that's a huge market there.
And then heading back to AM Online, and this is a story from eBay Motors Group, who are obviously our sponsor for the podcast. But dealers' used car stock levels declined 30% amid post-lockdown demand, and that kind of does reflect a lot of the other conversations that are taking place across the sector, isn't there, about that supply and demand at the minute across the market.
Yeah, you're right. So average dealer stock levels down 30% year on year to 47 vehicles. So that's across the board. But interestingly, that they've identified that buyer inquiries were actually up 153%. So these are email inquiries into dealerships, phone call inquiries. So up 153% compared to the absolute low point in March. So that's, again, following on from what we were saying about the new car market, this is a reflection of pent-up demand. So there is big demand out there for used cars. And of course, the challenge facing dealers, as eBay Motors Group point out, is now sourcing stock and keeping on top of that.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the figures that we see in terms of the wholesale market are still strong. First-time conversions are strong year on year. Cap value performance is still strong. The Cap HPI published their figures with strong performance, albeit caution on sort of future, as they believe that demand could be faltering alongside the values at the minute. But again, one that is very strong marketplace at the minute, and it's everybody's just hesitant of how long it will continue. But if the stock isn't there, then people need stock, and they'll pay the money to purchase it, won't they?
Yeah, and eBay Motors Group estimate that average list prices were pretty much stable month on month at £12,791 as an average. And I think that was just down 0.6%, because there have been reports from Cap HPI and Auto Trader that values have risen. So we are seeing some fluctuations here, but this is positive news. The positive to take away from this story is that consumer demand for used cars, it is out there.
It is, yeah, and I think as you say, with prices are holding strong. I think retail prices are holding strong as well as trade prices, which is the key measure, and hopefully there's a margin in it for the dealers at the minute as well. So one that everybody will be watching very closely.
So you're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group, the only weekly podcast serving the car retailing sector, and available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, and SoundCloud. We had a little blip with Spotify during the week, but we're back up to date with them, aren't we?
It is, yeah. The links have been refreshed, and all the episodes are up to date now on Spotify. So thanks to Mina, who pointed that out, from Westway, who we mentioned quite a few weeks back on the podcast. But well spotted, and thanks for letting us know on that one.
Yes, eagle-eyed, so thanks for that.
Definitely. So we're heading over to AM, and this is acquisition. Quite an interesting acquisition, really, because this is Stoneacre Motor Group acquires Hodgson Newcastle Limited Car Dealership Group, and this is a small group up in Newcastle there, and it's quite an interesting one, because I think the third paragraph in talks about a handshake between the Stoneacre chairman Richard Teetham and Stephen Hodgson was sufficient to ensure that the original deal continued once the lockdown had been lifted, and that's kind of reflecting on the sentiment that I'd heard across the market, that the deal was meant to go through at the end of March, because Hodgson's wanted the March numbers in. They wanted the full month of March, the first quarter of the year, before handing over to Stoneacre, and as we know, that didn't happen, and so the lockdown happened on the 23rd of March, and whether it was a social distance handshake, I'm not so sure, but they obviously they've continued, and it's gone through following the restriction lift.
Yeah, and it is a good acquisition. So Stoneacre, they're rated number 15 in the AM100 with revenues before the deal just shy of £1 billion. So as you say, it's acquired Hodgson Newcastle. Now, Hodgson, their turnover was 76.8 million in 2018. And what's as a result of the acquisition, Stoneacre has added the Toyota franchise to its list of brands, and it's taken on the ownership of Hodgson's Mazda, Suzuki and Toyota dealerships at Silverlink Newcastle, as well as Mazda and Toyota facilities at Gateshead. So it's over 2 large locations, and it means that Stoneacre, they now represent 26 brands in 59 locations with 120 outlets, and they've gone over the 1 billion turnover figure. So a good purchase there.
Yeah. I mean, we did talk. I mean, do you remember when it was constantly there was an acquisition, and then we had a podcast and we had an acquisition from Stoneacre, and that's the chairman's vision. He has this target and he wants to achieve it, and he goes out and he will be looking at other. I suspect he will be looking up for other opportunities and acquisitions as this is the probably start of many to come. But he'll have a target. He'll have a view of what number he wants to get to and by when. Now that he's hit his measures last year, and in terms of his turnover and his number of outlets, and I'm sure he'll have another target that he'll be looking to achieve as well.
Yeah, and you'll hear about it almost first on Motor Trade Radio.
Yes, definitely. So going a little bit, and this is kind of linked with some of the conversation again, referring back to Dale Wyatt and our most recent interview, and you say you'll hear it at the end, and if you've not listened to it already, but stay tuned. And we talked to Dale, didn't we, about the online channel, that digital proposition, and what his thoughts were from a Suzuki perspective. But actually, we are heading to a story in AM Online, and this has come from the iVendi business with James Chews, the CEO of iVendi, and he talks about online car sales. Part exchange should be handled offline, which is an interesting headline and actually makes you think about the direction that we're going in. But actually, his view is that potentially the part exchange, because of the nature of it in terms of getting the valuation right, the acceptance of the valuation from the consumer perspective, but he feels that should be done separately to other things.
Yeah, it is an interesting one, this, because he does talk about how consumers can feel disappointed, I guess is the right word, in terms of the valuation they get online. And it does take away that sort of key element of the face-to-face negotiation, where if you're not happy with the Part X, you do have an opportunity to negotiate, but you don't have that online. So he is saying that there is a physical place for part exchange as part of digital transactions.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a lot of work going into online part exchange valuations, and I think judge services are involved in terms of doing some surveys to consumers after a valuation's been done on an online valuation. We as a business, Cox Automotive, are involved with that online valuation in terms of the appraisal. It's trying to get that balance right, isn't it? That you want the process to be as onerless as possible, as simple as possible, as efficient as possible, but it's got to be accurate at the same time. So, you try and make sure that the consumer doesn't, it's as easy as possible for the consumer in that digital space, but actually you've got to get that valuation right, because when it does become a face-to-face and the checking of that valuation in terms of the description and the appraisal of that vehicle, you don't want further negotiation at that point in the showroom, do you? It needs to be all done in that online environment. So it's a move that a lot of the solution businesses are working very hard on to achieve, because if you're going to do a full end-to-end online transaction, as Dale said, they've got to be coherent, haven't they, with the physical environment as well as the digital environment.
Yeah, and Dale makes it quite clear that he's a fan of a blended approach where digital and physical work together. So click and collect isn't necessarily the be all and end all, purely digital. He does promote the role of the dealer as part of this transaction, and face to face, the power of face to face.
Definitely. So, I mean, a lot of headlines to think about. It definitely sort of, and we've mentioned the interview there with Dale a few times on the special interview we did, but actually many of the headlines this week are linked to some of the conversations that we had with Dale before these headlines. So it's kind of
it's almost as though we planned it this way, Phil.
It's amazing, isn't it? And,
it is.
But there's a lot happening. I mean, I think we mentioned the Mitsubishi at the start of the show this week, and obviously with that interview with Rob Lindley, a lot of conversations. I don't know what you're seeing, Curtis, but a lot of activity now with those dealers that either are soulless with the brand in the UK, or have the representation with the brand in the UK, and what they're doing, what brands they're looking at, and conversations with other brands. And with the other interview we mentioned it in is the Nathan Tomlinson one, wasn't it? That was a fantastic interview with Nathan, and we talk about his penetration in his territory for Mitsubishi, and as we say, probably have the people knocking on his door for taking their franchise now.
Yes, there was actually a very good webinar that Auto Retail Network did this week, and one of the guests was Robin Luscombe, and he has asked that question: what does it mean to him and his business with Mitsubishi pulling out of Europe? And he was quite philosophical about it, because obviously his strength is in Suzuki, and he now has MG. But he said that demand is still strong for Mitsubishis. There's a big stockpile of vehicles, new vehicles, which are working their way through the system. And he said it's always been and always will be a strong after-sales franchise. So it wasn't all gloom and doom.
No, exactly. I think that's the key with it, isn't it? I mean, there is product coming through for the short term, and as you say, there's still a high percentage of those vehicles on the road that need service and need after sales, and there was a stronger, a used car market as well for those products as well, because let's not kid ourselves. I mean, they were very strong in certain areas, particularly that pickup sector as well, weren't they, Mitsubishi? So, as you say, still opportunities there for many of the retailers.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this week. You've been listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Stay tuned for the interview that we've been talking about with Dale Wyatt, the UK boss of Suzuki. It's a wide-ranging chat, and Dale takes us through the brand's lockdown and restart, and how Suzuki has worked closely with its network throughout this period, and also, as we mentioned, his thoughts on digital and physical retailing and expectations for the sector over the coming months. So in the meantime, join Philip and I again next weekend for our review of the headlines. But until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him. Hello and welcome from me, Philip Nothard, and Curtis Hutchinson to the special Motor Trade Radio podcast brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. So many thanks again for joining us in the latest series of special interviews themed around sharing best practices as car retailers manage their way through the challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. Previous interviews with Mitsubishi UK boss Rob Lindley, Peugeot Managing Director David Peel, Virtue Motors Robert Forrester, and many more are still available to stream on Apple and Google Podcasts and Spotify.
For this episode, we're delighted to welcome to the show Dale Wyatt, Director of Automobile at Suzuki GB. Welcome to the show, Dale.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
Welcome.
No, you're more than welcome, Dale. Great to have you with us today. By way of a quick recap of your career for the benefit of our listeners, you started in automotive at Volkswagen Group back in 1994 and held management roles across various brands over a 10-year period, from area sales manager to brand manager. And you also ran the VW Group sponsored dealer program. You worked at Ridgeway Garage's Audi Oxford as head of business from 2004 to 2006, moved to Saab, the much missed Saab, I must add, from 2006 to 2007 as regional manager. And then you joined Suzuki in 2007 as dealer development manager before becoming sales and marketing director and then director of automobile. So under your leadership, the brand has consistently punched above its weight in terms of consumer satisfaction, as witnessed by high ratings in the annual JD Power and Driver Power surveys. And your dealers like the brand too, as it's always rated highly in the NFDA surveys. Last year, the brand sold 35,000 new cars in the UK, taking a 1.5% market share. And this year, Suzuki celebrates its 100th anniversary.
Some background there, Dale. Welcome. So welcome to the show, Dale. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I mean, over the years we've seen each other at conferences and little bumped into each other, but it's great to have you on the show at long last. And with everything else, we've obviously, what can you take us through from your perspective, sort of what happened following obviously the lockdown, which seems a long time ago now, on the 23rd of March, and some of the challenges for your brand in terms of Suzuki, in terms of that car brand in the lockdown, and how you maintained comms throughout the network, and how much of the network stayed open for after sales?
Big question there, Phil. I think it's about mindset to start with. So we decided to try and use the difficult times as an opportunity. And I've always said you can measure a franchise partnership based on the way that brand partner behaves when things are tough. It's easy to be supportive when you've got a new product and lots of cash in your pocket. But when things are tough, you can really see what the partnership's like. So for me, the key message was to try and give the network certainty. So I sent a network letter out very early in the process, guys, that I called No Chink of Light, which was really about trying to give the network certainty around the things that were important to them right then. And the key priority was cash. So we took some early steps and pulled forward all of the dealer bonus payments as early as we could. We had a brainstorm and deferred as many franchise costs as we could and suspended many. And importantly, we worked closely with our partner, Suzuki Financial Services, to mirror the same approach. So I think the key thing was to give the network confidence around cash initially. And then it was about confidence. So I've always tried to stay really close to the dealer network. And I make a point of having two successful phone calls a day with every dealer in the franchise on a regular basis. So I continued with that. We had webinars, and then we just tried to not overload the dealers, but give them support by sharing government best practice on furlough and CBILS and offering the specialist finance support. And importantly, we encouraged the dealers to speak up. We didn't want anybody to get into difficulty and to stay quiet about it. So I think those were the actions we took. And in terms of your follow-up question with regards to the network staying open, most of our dealers closed. We had some dealers open for sales and after sales, looking after key workers, but most dealers found that trying to operate after sales only just wasn't viable. So most of our dealers closed and furloughed a number of staffs, and we had owner drivers running the business on their own, to be frank, guys, during that period.
Now, Dale, the lockdown came during the busiest week of the busiest month of the year. How did the fulfillment of March new plate orders actually pan out? And how is access to new stock looking now?
The March impact on deliveries wasn't significant, but the momentum that we lost was. The lockdown set us back circa 7,000 units. We didn't have any big challenge in the end of March. We've never been a large pre-reg business. And our stocking model is different. Suzuki certainly doesn't have a just-in-time model. We order our stock 6 months in advance with the factory. So we're in a good place with stock volume. We've got more stock than we planned. And this quarter, we're aiming at selling around about 10,000 units from a stock bank of 14,000 cars. And most of that stock is with us now, so we're well placed for a good month in September and maximise the quarter.
And you say you're in a good place with stock now. Is that because, back in tail end of last year or beginning of this year, when you were putting in place stocking for March, perhaps you were thinking of Brexit and possible supply problems, supply issues?
Yeah, we were planning two things. Obviously, looking at Brexit, but also we were planning a brand reset for our business. We had hoped to enter into Q3 with all of our old stock gone and a completely hybrid range from Q4. So we'd ordered all of our hybrid stock, and we were running out of our non-hybrid stock. So we had a duplication of stock that was unplanned because of the lockdown.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're now in August, and we know that the restart happened across sort of not all of the UK on the 1st of June, and I think many were looking at June as sort of the restart month. But I think with Wales coming on late and Scotland coming on late, it certainly didn't perform. But July looks to be performing. So how was the restart for Suzuki, and how did July perform?
Pretty well. The market stats are difficult to compare year on year, and they belie the truth. Last year we were battling with WLTP derogation and running out two of our popular models, Celerio and Bologna. But against our internal plan, we overperformed July by 500 units, so it was better than we expected. We identified 4 stages to prepare our dealers and prepare our business post-lockdown. So the first stage was lockdown. Then I was conscious that we'd all been working behind the scenes, working on strategy and plans. It'd been very easy to overload our network at the point when they were just trying to get back to work. So we created 4 stages lockdown, and the first stage we called back on your feet, which was just about trying to encourage the dealers to just get up and running and just cope with initial demand in a reactive way rather than a proactive way. So our stages were lockdown, back on your feet, and then up and running and sprinting to the line. And during July, we've encouraged the dealers to move from back on your feet to up and running in August. So for me, it's about phases and doing things steadily and moving from that reactive to that proactive activity. I think it's key that every dealer now gets their September plate change mindset, and the dealers start doing the things that they know work and know will reap rewards in the September period.
Dale, what role does used cars play within that? And maybe if you could take us through the role of used cars in the network, but both now as we go through that restart period and also into the future.
I will answer that question, Curtis, but I just thought another point that I think I should mention with regards to getting dealers back on the feet. If you're happy for me to go backwards.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I was thinking, as a team, we were keen to support dealer stability, and the first thing we did was we decided to create a new TV ad, which was an 8-week TV burst of TV featuring our dealers, which we called Helping You Get Back on the Road.
Yeah.
So we wanted to create an advert that told the public and our dealers that we were open for business, and it was a message for both our dealer network and our customers. We thought that was key. And then we abandoned dealer targets and dealer standards and moved towards fixed margins and simple trading terms, just to try and give dealers the confidence to be able to start trading with certainty from day one. And then when we looked at offers, we introduced a 0% finance offer with nil deposit. And then we were concerned that a number of dealers were having trouble with test drives, and the customers may not be keen to do a test drive, so we introduced a 7-day return, which I think is unique in the industry. So we're saying to our customers that if you buy it and don't absolutely love it, you can return it for no quibble reason within 7 days. So I think we've tried to cover most of the angles.
And how do you think that's going, Dale? Sorry, I mean, I've seen the adverts. I think they're great. I really do, because, like you say, they are the dealers, aren't they? Those are the guys that are at the front, the sharp end, and those are the guys in the adverts. And I keep seeing them come up, and they're fantastic. How? This is about initiatives, and you say, you mentioned earlier on about that phased approach, and that there's a September mindset now that, basically without looking back, March was what it is, the quarter was what it is. There's, we need to think forward now and build that order bank. All these initiatives, how are they going? I mean, they must be really positively received by the dealer network. Are you getting much feedback from them?
Yeah, the feedback has been good. What I would say is that some people are still overcautious. I recently wrote to the network and reminded them that as a young boy, I used to surf. And our business is a bit like surfing in that we only get 2 waves a year. And and the next wave's coming. And I was always taught, if you want to catch a big wave, you've got to start paddling early. And I think some of our dealers are still kind of waiting for the wave rather than preparing for it. So we just need to make sure that we're up to speed.
Yeah. Now, Dale, as part of this restart, what role has used cars played, and what role will used car sales play in the future? As you've intimated, a lot of your dealers are owner managers, possibly running small sites, and used cars are an important part of the business.
Yeah, very much so. I've always thought of our business as a 4-legged stool. So you've got new retail, new fleet, used and after sales. And I think if you don't take care of one of the legs, the stool falls over, especially in these difficult times. So used car performance is one of the most variable areas in any franchise. My experience is that you can provide consultancy, support and education to a dealer around new cars, but used cars is an area that they take pride in. So we've tried to offer consultancy to support the dealers, and I think it's an area that there's an opportunity to improve. When I look at the stock turn and the average return on investment for used cars, it varies significantly from dealer to dealer. So I think there's a need to take on board common practice and to professionally look after used cars and just kind of throw off the shackles of that dealer mindset, which is around, I'll make some money out of this car no matter what I do, and hold on to it out of pride. So I think there are lots of used car performance management tools and lots of great consultants out there, and I think some of the dealers need to listen to the experts.
So in terms of, I mean, you mentioned earlier about, the challenges facing now in this, I hate to use it, but this new norm world that we are now in around this social distancing, the challenges of test drives and the initiatives that you put in place there around like the 7-day return, etc. But as we move forward, what role will online sales play in the future for Suzuki, and whereabouts are you now in that process?
Well, there's no doubt that online has moved on. I think we went into lockdown in March 2020, and it feels like we emerged in June 2022. Feels like we skipped forward a couple of years. But when I think about online, I think we should be agnostic about the purchase method. I think we need to try and find a way to blend physical and virtual. And online is a method to improve our funnel efficiency. And the key for me is how we work to deliver that seamless handover from digital to physical and vice versa. Because I think that handover from online to physical and vice versa is the key area. And we're encouraging every dealer to review what I call their digital disconnects. A digital disconnect hasn't got to be a click to buy button. It could be a badly worded or badly created form. The big threat that I see, guys, is that we become a commodity. And we need to find a way to humanize or personalize that online experience. So I'm not a fan of call centers or virtual showrooms. I want to find a way to connect the consumer with their local dealer, not virtual chat, but what I call virtual dealer. I think there's a way to introduce customers in a handover either digitally or virtually direct to a very enthusiastic local dealer who's very keen to meet your customer needs.
Yeah, so as you say, that agnostic approach, so that it is where that customer feels they want to do partial online, partial physical, and move between the two is key. Do you feel then?
I think so. I think we need to put the customer in charge, and we need to try and find a way to personalise that human experience, because digital can feel very soulless if you're not careful. And when I think about the story that we've gone through, when I think about the businesses that are failing, most businesses are failing because of lack of cash or lack of a digital solution. So digital is key. But we've been looking at supporting our dealers for about 18 months, 2 years with digital, and the journey we've gone through has been remarkable. I remember initially it was just about making sure that every dealer realised there was a lead in their inbox, a digital lead in the inbox. Somebody had physically clicked a link on the website and inquired about a car. And then it was about getting dealers to respond. And then when we looked at the responses, we found there were grammatical errors and spelling mistakes in dealers' responses. And then the response became the key thing. We moved to trying to respond within an hour. And then it was about adding content. And I think now it's about personalising content and making it professional. So if you're a digital player, you've got to be fast, professional, with personalised content. Because I think customers can see through amateur content now and just are used to a much higher level of quality in terms of digital interaction. So the game never stops.
Now, you mentioned earlier, Dale, the impact that WLTP had on the brands last year and indeed the sector generally. The EU CAFE emissions legislations are among the challenges, the many challenges facing the sector as OEMs move to reduce their average fleet emissions across Europe. Can you explain the impact it's having on UK operations? Because I understand that there's the exit from diesel, the discontinuation of the chimney model, which was very popular, and also how's the transition to hybrid and EV panning out for the brand?
Well, it's a huge impact. We've got these irresistible forces that are just that, irresistible legislation, new products to cope with legislation, change in buyer behaviour, and the internet, and we're forced into a position where manufacturers have to produce cars that some customers are just not ready for. And also we're having to delete some models that customers love. So I know the government are keen to encourage a huge shift. But it feels like the government is saying, cross that river, but I'm taking the bridge away.
Yeah.
I think we need a stepping stone to help us try and get to the other side. And we see hybrid as a stepping stone. All the research that I see says that most consumers are at least 1 or 2 car changes away from a full electric solution. So we've got non-electric cars as part of our portfolio for the next 5 to 10 years. Well, I think we're pretty well placed. I think having every model in our range as hybrid as standard in Q4 is a good stepping stone. I don't ignore electric, but I think majority of our business will be internal combustion engine with hybrid for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and do you think that's resonating with your customer base? Are they looking at hybrid rather than EV at the moment?
Very much so. We're seeing a lot of people come in talking about hybrid. I think customers want to do their part, do their bit, but I think that the electric step is a big step, and there are lots of issues around range anxiety and pricing that not all customers are ready for. I think there will be a tipping point, but I just don't think it's there yet.
And I mean, at the start, Curtis mentioned it. So you've got the 100th anniversary, and what does that mean for the brand and the dealers, and the long-term commitment from Suzuki in the UK, and especially after the recent headlines of last week around Mitsubishi recent announcement of their withdrawal from the European new car market.
Well, the 100 years means it's 100 years since our incorporation, when we started making looms. The last time I was in Japan, Osamu Suzuki, who still is chairman and runs the company, talked about being reborn and talked about focusing on the next 100 years. So I'm pretty confident we've got a future. But my thoughts are with Mitsubishi dealers and Coke Car Company. Must be some difficult times for them, and I think there could be lots of other challenges ahead. From our perspective, I'm pretty pleased that we've demonstrated our commitment to meeting the needs by developing a fit for Europe product range. I think that's the key thing. And the hybrid solution is an expensive one, and it's one that we've applied across the whole of our range. So I'm pretty confident we'll be here for a year or so yet.
if not a bit longer, Dale.
So, next 100 years, I think, Dale, is the...
And finally, Dale, what are your hopes and expectations for the brand itself and the sector generally in the short, medium and long term?
Well, from a brand perspective, I've always thought that our brand and our network deserved a 2% volume, 2% market share. So I think we'll get that when we deserve it, and I just don't think we deserve it just yet. I think we're going to go through 3 phases. We're going to go through transition, stability and growth. I think we need to plan those phases appropriately. The opportunity is huge, change is constant. I always remember being taught about a change model that started off with denial, then moved on to blame, and then to guilt, and then moved on to uninformed optimism, which is, I think, where we are a little bit now. I think we need to, the fact that we've had a good restart doesn't mean that we're out of the woods yet. I think we need to change our businesses and move towards meaningful change. And then when I look forward, what I'd like to achieve with Suzuki, I want to be number 1 in Europe. I know it's important to deliver a stable profit. We're the most advanced market in Europe, and the UK is one of the most advanced markets in the world, so we can still use our market as a test bed for future initiatives. I want to focus on customer care. And importantly, I know this is a bit hackneyed, but I want to have dealer relationships at the end of the industry. I think we are interdependent, and if we can keep that interdependent and keep that strong Suzuki dealer relationship, we can survive whatever comes around the corner.
Yeah, and as a follow-on to that, Dale, I gave a brief recap of your career, and you've been close to dealers throughout your career, and you've worked in dealerships as well. How important has that been to you as the leader of Suzuki in the UK?
I think really important. I mean, it starts that I like them, and I respect them. Having tried to be a dealer myself, I know how difficult it is. So I think that's important. The dealer is the physical embodiment of the brand. Whatever we say or do, whatever money we spend on advertising, or whatever we do with products, and if we don't meet the customer in a way that supports that proposition, we've failed. So I think it's recognizing that you've got to put your ego to one side, and the dealer is king in the customer relationship. So if the dealer's king, you better look after them. So that's always been my approach.
No, I mean, just for me now, I mean, it's just obviously, I mean, just got to thank you personally for coming on today, Dale. And, I think really Curtis's recap at the start there in terms of that, the NFDA surveys, the results, and from feedback I get from the dealers that operate within the Suzuki brand, and they do resonate what you've just been talking to about, that relationship that you have with the dealer network. So it's testament to what you do and the vision that you've got for the UK dealer network. And I think for me, that goal of being number 1 in Europe and 2% market share with some of them initiatives and that staged approach and that digital proposition that you've been talking about. And we know that, short term, as you said right at the start, that there's been challenges for some of the dealer network around cash flow, and we know that it's been regularly talked about. But I think that for me, that vision that you've got, the sort of that, I think that approach to, as they say, waiting for that crest of the wave to come. You've got September. There's still challenges in there. I think you've said that clearly, that we're not out of the woods, are we? In any means, in terms of this short term, there's still a lot more to come in from the impact of COVID and some of the changes across Europe and the international markets.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's some interesting times ahead. I think we've gone through more change in the last year than most of us have experienced in our lives, but I think it's tested us. And it never stops being fun, does it, guys? It never stops challenging your thought process.
We're still here, aren't we? We're still here.
We are, yeah. Yeah, well, Dale, many thanks for joining us today. Really do appreciate you coming on. It's good to catch up with you again. And many thanks for sharing your experiences and observations at what is still an important time for car dealers across the UK. So thanks for that.
My pleasure. Good luck, everybody, in December.
Thanks very much. So that's all we have time for now. You've been listening to this special Motor Trade Radio podcast interview brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Many thanks to you for listening and supporting the podcast. Philip and I will be back with the industry headlines on Saturday, but do watch out for more special podcast interviews over the coming weeks. Until next time, stay safe and stay well.